his car, the cool night breeze greeting his face as he walked slowly towards the main door of Ling's house. This house already felt so familiar, like it was his second home. Orm felt comfortable going in and out at any time without feeling awkward. As soon as the door opened, a hush fell over him. The house was quiet, and Orm thought Ling must be asleep, considering it was already 11 o'clock at night. Carefully, he climbed the stairs to Ling's room. Arriving at the door, Orm grabbed the doorknob and opened it slowly, the subtle sound of squeaking door hinges infiltrating the silence. Squeak! However, Orm was surprised to see Ling already standing by the sofa, her gaze straight at Orm, as if waiting for him for a long time. Peeling, why aren't you sleeping? I thought Vi was asleep, Orm asked with some confusion. How can I sleep if you haven't come home? She replied softly, but with a stern tone. Slowly, she stepped closer to Orm, her eyes not leaving Orm's face, which looked a little worried. Orm smiled a little, trying to ease the tension. Peeling, Vi needn't bother waiting for me. However, before Orm could finish his sentence, Ling suddenly brought her face closer, as if trying to sniff out something. Her eyes looked at Orm with a sharp and serious gaze. You've been drinking, huh? Didn't you say there was only a lecture? Orm felt his heart beat faster. Just now, after the lecture, I went for a quick drink with View. She invited me, so I accompanied her. Orm replied, trying to sound as calm as possible. He hoped that excuse would be enough to convince Ling. Why didn't you tell me you went drinking? Ling asked again, this time more intensely, as if searching for the truth in every word that came out of Orm's mouth. Orm tried to calm Ling down by taking her hand. Sorry, Vi, my phone died, so I didn't have time to give you any news. Ling was silent, just staring at him wordlessly. The silence between them was so thick that it made Orm a little nervous. However, he decided to end the conversation quickly before the atmosphere became more tense. Then, I'm going to clean up first. Then we can go to bed, okay? Orm said as he gently rubbed Ling's arm, then hurried into the bathroom. While waiting, Ling climbed onto the bed and laid down on the mattress. Her eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, while her mind drifted somewhere else. A few minutes passed, and the sound of the bathroom door opening broke her reverie. Orm came out of the bathroom in his pajamas. He walked over to the bed and plopped down next to Ling. Without saying anything, Ling immediately shifted her body closer to Orm and rested her head on his chest. How cozy, Ling murmured with her eyes closed, feeling the warmth flowing from Orm's body. Orm's hand moved to gently stroke Ling's hair. Does it feel very comfortable? He asked softly. Of course, it's the most comfortable place for me when I'm tired, Ling replied firmly. When I'm with you, it feels like all my burdens and tiredness are gone. Orm smiled at that answer, then cautiously asked, how was Peeling as dinner with Pemian? Ling snorted softly. The usual. Honestly, if it wasn't for you asking me to go, I probably would have refused. I just feel sorry for Pemian. He's asked Peeling out so many times, Orm replied quietly. I know, Ling said with a sigh, but now I feel like it was the right decision. At least I can pay off the debt of meeting Pemian, and he won't keep asking me until I'm sick of it. Orm smiled gently. Let's just say that Peeling's debt has been paid off. That's right, just this once and no more, Ling said firmly as he rubbed Orm's arm, then lifted his head to give Orm a gentle peck on the cheek. Now let's go to bed. I'm getting sleepy. Alright, let's get some sleep. "We have work tomorrow," Orm said, agreeing with a small smile on his face. Before resting his head back on Orm's chest, Ling gave Orm a long peck on the lips, as if to ensure that the night would end peacefully. "Good night, Norm," Ling said softly. "Good night, Peeling," Orm replied as he gently rubbed Ling's head. Slowly, silence filled the room, and the two women drifted off to sleep in the comfort of each other's presence. 1 week later, Min Ferovich's birthday fan meeting was in full swing today. Fans had already begun to enter the event venue enthusiastically, looking forward to precious moments with their idols. Meanwhile, the invited guests, consisting of Min's close friends, began to arrive one by one, filling the venue. Among the crowd, there was Ling, who came accompanied by Orm, his personal assistant, although Orm was actually reluctant to attend the event. His responsibility as an assistant made him unable to let Ling go alone. He must always accompany Ling wherever he went. "Let's sit here," said Ling softly, pointing to the seats that had been reserved for them. "Okay," Orm replied briefly. He complied, though his mind was wandering. His eyes swept around the venue, noting how their seats were quite close to the stage. The two finally sat down, ready to enjoy the fan meeting. Occasionally, Ling waved her hand at the audience, who noticed her presence. Some of them even recorded her arrival and greeted her excitedly. Ling's popularity in the entertainment world makes her always the center of attention, including at this event. Moments later, the show began. The atmosphere inside the venue became livelier when Min appeared on stage and started singing his hits. Every song Min sang was greeted with cheers and applause from his fans, until finally, near the end of the show, Min suddenly spoke before continuing with his last song. "I dedicate this song to someone special," said Min in a soft tone, making the atmosphere suddenly quiet, full of anticipation. He began to sing Princess, but midway through the song, Min stepped off the stage with a bouquet of flowers. All eyes were on him, and Ling, who had noticed Min walking towards her, felt something strange, especially when Min was now actually standing right in front of her. "Can I ask you to stand up?" Min's voice sounded soft yet firm. Ling, without saying anything, stood up as Min requested. Her heart was racing, sensing that something was different this time. Ling's eyes widened at the sight of Min suddenly kneeling in front of her, holding up a bunch of flowers that were thrust right in front of her face. The whole room fell silent, with only a surprised sigh from the audience. "Will you be my girlfriend again, Lingling?" said Min in a voice laden with emotion, his gaze straight into Ling's eyes. The audience immediately erupted in cheers, some shouting for Ling to accept the proposal of love that Min had just spoken. Ling was shocked. Her eyes widened, and for a few seconds, she was speechless. The atmosphere in the venue was suddenly filled with excitement from the fans, who witnessed the moment. Ling then turned to Orm, who also looked surprised by this. Their eyes met for a moment after that. She looked back at Min, who was still kneeling in front of her, waiting patiently. Ling took a deep breath, trying to calm himself down before finally, his hand stretched out, taking the flower that Min gave him. "I want it," Ling replied briefly but surely. The answer was immediately greeted with louder cheers from the audience. A big smile was etched on Min's face. The feeling of relief was evident on his face, and without waiting any longer, he immediately stood up and hugged Ling tightly, venting the happiness he had long harbored. The audience cheered, happy to see the love story between Ling and Ming rekindled. Amidst the euphoria, Orm could only clap his hands with a faint smile. His feelings were mixed. He was happy to see Ling and Ming's happiness, but there was something suffocating in his chest. However, he held those feelings in, keeping them from showing in front of everyone. All of Ling's activities for today were over, and finally, for the first time in a while, Ling was able to go home earlier than usual. When the car stopped in front of the house, Ling got out first, but instead of going straight in, she stood by the door, waiting for Orm, who was still busy getting things from the back seat of the car. "Let me help," Ling volunteered, trying to grab the item Orm was carrying. "It's okay, Fi. I can carry it myself," Orm replied softly, declining with a small smile on his lips. Ling could only let out a long, slightly heavy breath. Before walking slowly into the house, she said nothing more, simply walking ahead with Orm following close behind. There was something that felt unusual since Ming's fan meeting earlier. Orm, who was usually always friendly and attentive, seemed more silent than usual. Ling could feel the distance widening between them. Once inside the house, Ling paused and stood in the living room. Her gaze followed Orm, who was putting things away. There was guilt haunting Ling's heart, a feeling that she couldn't ignore. She knew that since returning from the fan meeting, Orm hadn't spoken much. Even his facial expressions weren't as cheerful as usual. "Orm," called Ling in a low voice, almost a whisper. Orm stopped his activity and turned his head. "Does peeling need anything?" he asked, but his gaze deliberately avoided eye contact with Ling. There was caution in his voice. Ling swallowed, trying to calm himself before approaching Orm. He took both of Orm's hands, grasping them tightly. Orm's hands felt warm, yet there was a palpable tension there. "I'm sorry," Ling said, her voice sounding slightly shaky, full of regret. Orm paused, then in a flat tone he asked, "Apologize for what?" Ling looked at Orm, trying to find the courage within himself. "Because I accepted Ming's request to get back together. Actually, I did it because I felt bad rejecting him in front of so many people," Ling explained, her voice full of sincerity. Orm didn't answer. He remained silent, though in that silence, his feelings were getting heavier and heavier. Ling's words seemed to add to the burden in his heart that was already full of uncertain feelings. "Ming has been good to me," Ling continued, her voice softer. "There's a feeling that makes it hard for me to resist him, even though I know in my heart I'm not entirely sure. But Orm, I love you. Please understand my current situation." Hearing that confession, Orm smiled slightly. He raised his gaze, and this time, his eyes met Ling's directly. "Do whatever peeling thinks is best. I can only support peeling," he replied in a calm voice, though his heart was trembling violently. Ling looked at Orm gratefully. He knew that Orm's support meant a lot to him. Without waiting any longer, Ling pulled Orm into his arms, hugging him tightly. "I don't want you to misunderstand. That's why I explained everything," Ling whispered. "Even though I'm now Ming's girlfriend in public, the only person I love is you, Orm." Silence surrounded them for a few moments. The embrace seemed to be a protection for Ling and Orm, but inside, Orm's heart felt increasingly tight. Unable to hold back, tears began to flow down his cheeks. But before Ling realized it, Orm hurriedly wiped his eyes and slowly broke away from Ling's embrace. I believe peeling doesn't need to explain it like that, Orm said, trying to smile despite his very fragile feelings. Now, I have to go to the college. It's time for me to go to college. Ling nodded slowly, but her feelings were uneasy. What time will you be home? Do you want Fi to drop you off? She asked softly as she kissed the back of Orm's hand. Orm shook his head, his smile still on his face. No need. Peeling better get some rest. I'll go home as usual. Ling grasped Orm's hand once more before releasing it with a heavy heart. See you later, Fi, Orm said, stepping back slowly. See you, Ling replied. Her hand reached out to stroke Orm's hair gently before waving as Orm walked out. Orm waved back before turning around and heading towards his car. Once inside, he took a deep breath, trying to calm the turmoil in his heart. The music that echoed throughout the room and the twinkling lights had no effect on Orm, who sat transfixed in the corner of the bar. Amidst the crowd, Orm remained lost in his reverie, staring blankly at the table in front of him that was already filled with several bottles of alcoholic beverages. Every few minutes, he poured a drink into his glass and gulped it down mindlessly, downing bottle after bottle without realizing that his head was starting to feel heavy. Norm, a faint voice called out his name amidst the music. Orm, who felt his body had lost its balance, turned his head slowly, trying to recognize the voice that had just called him. Oh, peeing, he replied with a faint smile, though his eyes were already half dimmed. What's Fi doing here? She asked in a slightly staggered tone. I just finished meeting a friend and wanted to go home. But you... what are you doing here? Ying asked back while staring concernedly at the empty bottle in front of Orm. I was waiting for my friends, Orm replied briefly, before taking another sip from his freshly filled whiskey glass. Ying looked on with concern. 3 bottles of whiskey were already empty, and Orm was still trying to pour more. Are you alright? She asked gently but anxiously. Orm just nodded weakly. I'm fine, he replied quietly. Can Fi sit with you until your friends arrive? Ying offered, and when Orm gave a small nod, Ying immediately sat down next to him, not wanting to leave Orm alone. Not wanting to leave Orm alone in this state. Not long after that, Praking, View, and Milk arrived. All 3 looked surprised to see Ying sitting next to Orm. Sawadika, Ying greeted them with a friendly smile. Sawadika, Fi, the 3 replied in unison, though confusion still showed on their faces. Orm seems to be very drunk. I see that 3 bottles of whiskey are gone, Ying explained in a worried tone. Oh, this must be because of the news of Peeling and Peeming getting back together, Praking said in a furious tone, opening a more sensitive conversation. Ying, who heard Lingling Kwong's name, immediately perked up his ears. How do you mean? Does this have anything to do with Lingling Kwong? She asked, curious about what was really going on. The 3 friends exchanged glances, unsure whether to answer or not. Finally, Praking was the first to speak up. Actually, Orm and Peeling's relationship is more than just co-workers. They like each other, but Peeling asked for time to confirm her feelings. But we just read an article that during Peemian Esfen meeting, Peeling accepted Peemian as love back and they're now dating again. Orm, who heard that, raised his head slowly, looking at Praking with eyes full of sadness. Why did you tell me that? He asked in a weak voice. Praking sighed. I had no choice, and I did, she replied. But it was not anger that emerged from Orm. Instead, tears began to stream down his face. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you sadder, breaking. Trying to calm Orm, who had begun to sob. Why is this my fate? Orm's voice broke in the middle of his tears. Peeling said she only loved me, but she said she was sorry to reject Pinion. Should I take her word for it? Ying was also surprised to hear the confession. Ling really said that? She asked with a serious look. View, who had been silent, finally spoke up. If she still feels sorry for her ex, it's a sign that her feelings for Pinion haven't completely disappeared. Maybe his feelings for you will fade as well. Don't say that. View, Priking argued. Maybe he just doesn't want to embarrass Pinion in front of everyone. But if there are no feelings, he can definitely reject it. Why pity someone who has left us? Pity is just an excuse for people who are not firm with their own feelings, View said. Never mind, don't argue. Ying tried to calm the increasingly tense atmosphere. View looked at Orm with compassion. I'm sorry if I caused you more pain, Orm. I just wanted you to know the reality. I can't bear to see you hurt like this. What should I do now? Asked Orm hoarsely, still in tears. His hand moved to pour more whiskey, but Milk quickly snatched the glass away. That's enough, Orm. You've had too much to drink, Milk said as he moved the whiskey bottle out of Orm's reach. View advised for now. Just act normal. Don't show too much that you're distracted. Stay professional like you're meant to be an assistant. Yes, and if Peeling tries to approach you again, gently decline. Don't let these feelings interfere with your work, Milk added, trying to offer sage advice. Orm stared blankly at them. Can I do that? He asked in a weak voice before finally resting his head on the table. Too dizzy to say more. Milk looked at Ying. It seems Orm is already very drunk. Let's talk about this more later. Ying nodded. I'll take Orm home. Where is he staying? He's staying at Peeling as for the time being, Priking replied. Ying immediately helped Orm up and led him out of the bar. After making sure Orm got into the car safely, Ying got in and started the engine. Before leaving, he looked at Orm's tired face and gently stroked his hair. I've always liked you, but you always chose Ling. I gave in once, but this time I won't let Ling hurt you again. Ling walked back and forth with a growing sense of anxiety. Her eyes occasionally glanced at the clock on the wall, which was almost 12 p.m. Her mind was filled with worry because Orm hadn't come home yet, whereas usually after class, Orm would be home by 9 p.m. at the latest. What's more, all the phone calls Ling made went unanswered. It was as if something was wrong, and the thought tormented her even more. After much deliberation, Ling finally decided to grab the car keys lying on the table and head out. Her mind was made up. She was going to find Orm, no matter what. However, just as her hand was about to open the car door, an unfamiliar car pulled up in front of her house. Ling frowned, curiosity immediately taking over. Ying? Ling muttered in disbelief when she saw who got out of the car. Her face showed obvious discomfort. What are you doing here? How did you know my address? Ying just glanced over, no friendly expression on her face. Don't ask so many questions. Help me bring Orm, she replied as she hurriedly opened the passenger door. Ling's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Orm's name. Wasting no time, she ran over to check on Orm, who was looking very weak. His eyes closed and his breathing labored. With help, Ling picked up Orm's limp body and escorted him into the room. After making sure Orm was lying down comfortably, Ling and Ying left him to rest. In the living room, the atmosphere was tense. Ying stood with a cold demeanor, while Ling looked at her sharply, waiting for an explanation. I met Orm at the club earlier. He was drinking, alone. Ying explained, with an even tone, but her gaze sharpened on Ling. By chance, or did Orm invite you there? Ling asked, even though her feelings were already starting to flare up. There was something strange about this situation, and she wanted to know the truth. You don't need to know, Ying replied quickly. Anyway, Orm drank himself into a stupor, and it's all because of you. Her tone of voice rose, accusatory. Her gaze sharpened, seeming to pierce Ling's heart. You do like to ruin other people's lives, don't you? Watch what you say, Ling hissed, her voice rising. Her feelings were now completely ignited. Ying didn't back down one bit. She folded her arms across her chest, standing tall, defiant. You said you loved Orm, but you went back to mean. Do you think that didn't destroy Orm? Her voice grew sharper. If you can't love Orm sincerely, let him go. I will love him in a way you never could. Ling snorted. Her eyes narrowed in hatred. I won't let that happen. Ying walked over, her gaze full of challenge. You might not let Orm go, but just wait until Orm falls in love with me and asks you to split up. Ling's anger exploded. She grabbed Ying roughly by the collar, her eyes flashing with menace. I will never let Orm fall in love with you, so keep dreaming, she said in a low voice, emphasizing every word. But Ying remained calm. His smile was thin and full of mockery. She removed Ling's hand from her collar slowly. We'll see. Right now, Orm doesn't belong to anyone, including you, and I still have a chance to make him choose me. Ling squeezed his hand tightly, holding back the anger boiling inside him. Her gaze never left Ying, full of hatred and threats. Orm loves me, and only I have the right to have him. Ying just chuckled, her voice full of pride. We'll see, Ling. We'll see who Orm finally chooses, she said before turning to leave Ling's house with light steps, as if she had just won a battle. Ling stood rooted to the spot, her grip on her hands tightening, reveling in the emotions churning inside her. Ying's words continued to play in her head, echoing endlessly. Ying would definitely be able to take everything, but Ling would never allow Ying to take Orm from her life. Orm awoke from his sleep with a heavy head, the effects of the alcohol from the night before still taking over his body. He blinked his eyes several times, trying to recover his blurry vision. As he tried to get out of bed, a gentle hand held him down. Don't push it. You need to rest more. Ling's voice sounded soft, making Orm lay back down. Peeling. Orm realized that Ling had been sitting on the chair beside the bed. I don't want to go back to sleep. It'll make my head hurt even more. Ling nodded in understanding, then helped Orm to sit up against the headboard of the bed. She picked up the glass of water that was sitting on the table and handed it to Orm. Thank you, Fi, Orm said as he took the glass and gulped down the water to refresh his dry throat. After handing the glass back to Ling,